Sefer VaYikra, the book of Leviticus, is always the answer. It's in some ways the beginning, middle, and end of Torah. The setting is Genesis 15, when God is promising Abraham that his descendants will become numerous, inherit the land, and have a glorious future. And Abraham has the audacity to say, B'ma'ida, how will I know? Like, what proof do I have? And in Genesis 15, God doesn't answer that question. God just begins Brit HaBetarim, the covenant of the pieces. It says, take a 3-year-old calf. And so the rabbis in Tractate Megillah 31b imagine this conversation happening. Amar Avraham lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. God says to God, Abraham says to God, Ribono shel olam, Shema chas v'shalom Yisrael chotim lefanecha, v'ata oseh lahem kedur habambul u'kedur haflagam. What happens when this people, the people that will come from me, Sarah, sin? Will you treat the world like you treated the sinners of the flood or of the great dispersion, Bavel? Amar lo lav, God says to him, no, I'm not going to do that. Amar lefanav ribono shel olam, b'ma'ida, but how will I know you're not just going to destroy once again and start over? God responds, Chali egla mishuleshet, take for me a 3-year-old calf. In other words, sacrifice. Amar lefanav ribono shel olam, Abraham says back to him, God, tenach bizman shebeit hamikdash kayam. Bisman she'ein beit hamikdash kayam, ma teheh alehem. Yeah, great, that makes sense, Abraham says to God, if there's a place for sacrifices, a temple. But what happens when there's no temple and therefore no sacrifices? Amar lo, God says to him, kavar takanti lahem seder korbanot. I have already arranged for you the order of sacrifices, kol zman shekorim bahem, and when you recite them, I will account for you as if when you are learning, reciting the sacrifices, you are bringing them. And in those moments, I will treat your offerings of recitation as worthy of my forgiveness. In other words, Abraham says, retroactively, how will your anger subside in a world without a temple? And God says, I don't need the sacrifices. I need you to be engaged in what's behind the sacrifices. So what is that? I came across this week, preparing for Parashat VaYikra, for the beginning of Leviticus, a couple of commentaries that I want to quickly share with you. One is the Kli Yakar, Rav Shlomo Ephraim ben Aharon Munchitz, a 17th century commentator. He notices that the very first word of Leviticus, VaYikra, has a small aleph. This is often noticed and talked about. What he says, I think, is not often noticed or talked about. But avor zeh ha'aleph ketana remez, sha'ketanim yatchilu kan v'limud zehu berosh. Aleph Rosh La'otiot. He says, this little aleph is hinting at us, the reader, that our little ones, little aleph, should begin their learning right here. Really? We start children with VaYikra? In Sefer Hasidim, 12th, 13th century German compendium of pious traditions, author writes, Kshemasimim hana'ar ba'arisa bekorin lo shem, misimim sefer shel Torat kohanim merashotav. When a new child is born and placed in the crib and given a name, or read to there, it's not entirely clear, place the scroll or the Chumash, the books of Leviticus, around the child's head. What? Anybody else do that? Not me. And when this child begins to learn Torah, Shehu ben Chamesh, 5 years old, matchilin lo b'sefer VaYikra. Begin studying with VaYikra, the book of Leviticus, at 5 years old. Going backwards again, I'm doing these in reverse order. Midrash VaYikra Rabbah, on Parashat Tzav, actually, Amar Rabbi Asi, mipnei ma matchilin letinokot b'torat kohanim, ve'ein matchilim b'breshit. Rabbi Asi taught, why does one begin the teaching of children with the book of Leviticus and not Bereshit, which is to say, there is an early tradition going back into sometime in antiquity where children would not begin with Bereshit, the intuitive place to start teaching, especially children. That's where so many of the great stories is. We begin with Leviticus, and Rabbi Asi's saying, like, this doesn't make sense and demands explanation. This is what caught my attention. So here are a couple explanations. In this midrash itself, actually, the answer is Ele shahatinokot tehorim v'hakorbanot tehorim, because children are pure and the sacrifices are pure, or the whole point of VaYikra is to create a space of purity for the pure sacrifices. Therefore, yavo tehorim v'yasku bitorim. Therefore, let the pure come and engage with matters of purity, which is to say, the innocent should be primarily involved in, on behalf of the community even, bringing that which is pure. Innocence? Umipnei shehem tehorim ad achshav ve'enam yodim mahu tam chet va'avon. Midrash Tanchuma has its version, and it says the children are pure until now. They don't know the taste of sin and iniquity. Therefore, they are the perfect conduit for our now practice of reciting sacrifices as opposed to bringing them. And what happens? Ani ma'aleh alehem ki'ilu hem omdimu makrivim lifanai hakorbanot. It's as if God says they are bringing me sacrifices. And the Midrash in Tanchuma, Tzav, number 14, goes on to say, Sha'af al pi shecharab beit hamikdash ve'en korban noheg. Even though there are no sacrifices, the rabbis teach. This is still Rav Asi. Ilule hatinokot shekorin beseder hakorbanot lo haya haolam omed. If it were not for children reciting the order of sacrifices, the world would not stand. The very existence of the world, and here the world means the covenant, the relationship between God and Bnei Yisrael, rests on the capacity for us to know that we are imperfect and will make mistakes, and God to have set up a system for us to stay in covenantal relationship. And without that, the world as we know it falls apart. So it is on our children. It's a lot to put on them. Rav Yosef Patnazowski, a Polish rabbi who lived up until 1942, so well aware of what it meant to be a Jew in the world during that time, teaches Dematchilim im Yeladim b'Parshat VaYikra. We begin teaching children with Parshat VaYikra. Lechanech otam lehiot muchanim lahavi korbanot umesirat nefesh al yahadut. Why? To educate them so that they will be prepared for what kind of sacrifice it may take to express Yiddishkeit, or on behalf of our Judaism. This one hits hard. We teach children VaYikra because VaYikra is the sefer that reminds us over and over again that we are responsible for sacrificing something of ourselves to be in this relationship, to express the beauty of Judaism. And that has meant different things at different times in history. He may mean we need every Jew to know that being Jewish brings with it serious risk. But beneath that, beyond that, maybe above that, why not start teaching kids that living this life requires that we understand we own nothing. Anything and everything that has come into our possession ultimately belongs to the majesty of the cosmos, to God are things, land, whatever it may be. The first of anything, God's. Yiddishkeit is about sacrifice. So what do we do with a teaching like that, especially just less than 2 weeks out of a car ramming into a place of children learning in West Bloomfield, Michigan? Well, one, we take our children seriously and their learning seriously, and we protect them. We do whatever we can to protect them, which means building a world that is beyond the evil that exists, but it also sadly means building fortresses. And then we seriously engage their learning with matters of what it means to be Jewish in any time and in any place. Kids are not our future. They are our now. They are responsible for the world existing as it does, according to the Midrash. And frankly, I think that it's true. We give them sophisticated Torah sometimes. If a child knows or has said the words, it's not fair, they understand. They understand that the world sometimes operates in ways that don't lift up those who may deserve it and suppress those who don't, but is far beyond any explanation that would make sense. I don't think we do this well, taking our kids' learning seriously. I don't think we've done this well with the calendar, at least not since modernity, not since the Protestantization of Judaism. We've flipped Jewish life. We've turned Hanukkah and Purim, until recently, into kids' holidays, when in fact they are very much adult Jewish holidays, adding light into the world. Purim story is very much meant for adults to engage with the world upside down. And Passover, which is VaYikra televincha, you shall teach them to your children, we, at least until recently, created adult recitation sessions. But in fact, the Seder was fully intended to be for children to learn the story and for us to understand the story through the hearts of children. But the Seder can be a sophisticated place for children to engage with the story as well. It's not just throwing frogs around in the air. If a child knows how to say it's not fair, they understand that sometimes freedom comes at the expense of other people's safety, and that's something to deeply engage with. That is part of the story of the plagues. So I want to go back to the beginning. Why do we start children with VaYikra, and why might we want to offer that once again as sacred practice? Because VaYikra very much talks about the covenantal relationship between the Jewish people and God, because kids may be the perfect conduit for the rest of the community understanding it, and because kids are prepared at an earlier age usually than we think to be in adult spaces, to witness adults doing serious adult Judaism. And VaYikra is very much, at least as I learn it and understand it and study it, that sophisticated space. Let them lead us. They are our now. They are not our future. Okay, enjoy the book of VaYikra, of Leviticus, over the next couple of months, and Pesach Sameach.